This is Michael Delina with Century 21 Arizona Foothills. You can find me at phoenixrealestateaddict.com. Today we are going to look at a purchase contract. I am not going to go line by line because it's pretty complicated. What I am going to go over is what you're typically going to see, what your agent will go over with you, and generally what needs to be filled out, mostly by your agent, but with your help. So first of all, we're going to look at this front page. It's actually not a part of the contract. It's just an intention to you as the buyer. It's telling you, one, to read the entire contract, two, review what the seller discloses about the property. It's called a SPUD, so SPDS, and it's basically what they've done to the property, current condition of how it is. They can waive this and not give it to you, but it's pretty typical to have it. These are kind of all the different inspections that you could do on the property. And there's a couple other things you should be aware of here: CC&Rs, doing your final walkthrough, things you need to know about your loan. Excuse me. So this is kind of just something for you to look at. But getting into the actual contract here, this is the first page of the contract. I've used obviously a fictitious person here. It's Susie Homebuyer. In the case of you writing a contract, this will be your name. And the seller here we have as identified in section 9C, which is going to be where the seller actually signs on the last page. And if we go a little further down here, we have the premises in which you'll be putting a contract in, the assessor number, address. This is all stuff that your real estate agent will fill in. And included also here is the legal description. So this is kind of where you're going to have to put in your input here. You're going to have your purchase price. In this case, it's $150,000. And I just put it as an example, a 10% down for your down payment. I like to use $2,000 for earnest money. This can be different. You can go anywhere from 1-2% of the property, but I like 2,000. So this is kind of what it's going to look like, what you're going to ask for earnest. Additionally, what it's going to be, combined, they're 15,000, so 10% of purchase price, and then 135,000 by new loan. The next will be the actual close of escrow date. So today, the actual date is the September 8th, 2012, so I picked a month from then. If you're using like a credit union or some places that take a little bit longer, you might want to go 35 days out. They typically need that extra 5 days. And if you look at 1E here, possession, this is typically left blank unless you plan to possess the home before it closes or if the seller is going to stay in after. That's very rare, can get complicated. I don't recommend that. On 1F, these are things that are included with the document. So if the property says as is, we'll not make any other fixes from this point on. You would include the as is here. Sometimes there's buyer contingencies, domestic wells. What is most typical, I've highlighted here, is an HOA. And also, if a home was built before 1978, you have to include a lead-based paint disclosure. So here at the very bottom of the first page, it's fixtures and personal property that all are going to stay with the property. So it's important to read through this if you're a seller, but also a buyer, understand what should stay with the property, and if you're doing your final walkthrough, if it's not there, you need to let them know. Here, on line 45, here are additional things that you want to include. So this is just an example of some things that I would do. I usually ask for my buyers to get the refrigerator, the washer and dryer. I'm going to try to save them some money. And here I actually include the serial numbers, which is important. Make sure your agent does that. I have known sellers that will switch these out if you ask for just the washer and the dryer. And technically that's legal and they can do that as long as the serial number is not here. Moving down here, financing. If you are not paying with cash, you have to fill this out. Typically people like to see a qualified, pre-qualified form, which right here I noted is attached. That's very important. You want to stage yourself as a buyer very strongly. The next thing that needs to be picked out here we go, on line 2H, you want to say what type of loan you are getting. So in this case, I'm assuming this person is conventional. Right now, conventional or FHA are very popular. But also you have a VA loan, USDA, you can have an assumption of a previous loan, or you can have the seller carry. Now right here, this is something interesting to point out in line 77, seller concessions. Right now in Phoenix, it is a big seller's market. So concessions are quite rare. I just put an example here as something that you could ask for. So for example, they're asking for $1,800 towards closing costs. And this is probably one of the most important parts of the contract that most people don't go into and kind of breeze over. But line 85 here, the appraisal contingency. It says, in the event that the premises fails to appraise for the purchase price, Buyer has 5 days notice after the appraised value. Now, a lot of people think that needs to happen, the appraisal, in the first 10 days of the contract. That's not true. It's nice because then you don't necessarily have to spend money on an inspection, but it does not have to happen. So you do have this right to cancel the contract. You can also go ask for the price to be reduced, or you can renegotiate or just pay the difference with the lender. So let's say it appraised for 145 and the purchase price is 150. You could actually pay that extra 5,000. Right down here, you'll ask who will pay for the appraisal fees, and it says buyer here. That's fairly typical. And it says the appraisal fees are not included in seller's concessions. So now going down to title and escrow, this is just whoever's going to be running your title company. Again, fictitious title company. Your agent will probably have a preferred person to go with, and this will all be filled out by them. Going down a little further here, this is also important. Assessment liens. So anything that's outstanding for HOA or HOA transfer fees, which will be covered a little bit later, but it says will be paid in full by seller. This is important because there could be a lot of liens, and that could add to your cost as a buyer, which you don't want to do. Disclosures here. So again, this is the SPUDS disclosure that I was telling you about. They also should provide an insurance claims history for you. It's called a CLUE report. Just if there's been any fires, floods, any time when they had to call the insurance company. Again here, lead-based paint. If it was built prior to 1978, the seller has to notify you, and you have the right to do an inspection in that 10-day inspection period. Warranties, basically the seller warranties the major parts of their home. So plumbing, electrical, roofing, a couple other key areas. And this is saying that you're not relying on anything verbal. So you always fill in none right here. Due diligence. This is everybody, mostly the buyer, but doing your inspections and what you can do and what you should do. So it's saying you have your 10-day inspection period. You want to verify the square footage. You want to check for termites, which are very common in Arizona, so I would always do that. Usually the inspector who you have can add it on for an extra $65 or $70. You want to check if you're in a floodplain. You want to get insurance. 6F is one thing you're going to have to fill out, whether your home is on a sewer or septic. That's pretty common. You are going to have to initial all of these, talking about the sewer, understanding that if you have a swimming pool, you're going to have a pool bearer. Even if your house doesn't have a pool, still got to sign. And then also that the brokers are not qualified or licensed to conduct due diligence, and you need to get an inspector to look. Going on to page 6. This typically is not filled out, but it just says if the buyer disapproves, kind of what happens here. Going down, I always include a home warranty plan for a buyer. If you look here, it would be ordered by buyer, which would actually be me or your agent. You want to ask for probably just a basic plan, although you can do more. Like if it's got a pool, I would say basic plus pool. The name of the home warranty company, which I like using, Home Warranty of America, and then the amount not to exceed. So a basic is $360, and with a pool, I believe it's around $485. And note here, it will be paid for by the seller. That's pretty typical. 7A, 7B talk about a cure period and what happens if you breach the contract. Cure period is essentially a 3-day period where you give notice to them and something they should have done, and they have 3 days in which to comply. Going down here, 8A, these are additional terms and conditions. I always include this one in my contracts, just saying that earnest money will be deposited with title 2 days after acceptance, or no more than 2 days. Here's a good spot to also add, let's say there's renters in place already, where you can ask for a copy of the lease. You can make sure that you're going to get the security deposit. Those type of things can be added here in additional terms. And technically you could pretty much add whatever you want here. Whether they accept it or not, that's up to the seller, but you could add some crazy things there, and I have seen them. Getting towards the end here, time periods, a lot of stuff, what certain things mean. Here it's talking about earnest money where it needs to be deposited. This is from the line up at the top, so this is C line 305, and that's just right here in the additional terms. That's what I added. And here's an interesting part, terms of acceptance. So how long are you going to give them? So I said this was on the 8th, so I gave them 1 day. And actually it should be September 8th, but I gave them 1 day, and I gave them till 6 p.m. Typically right now 24 hours is plenty of time. In fact, I wouldn't ask for a whole lot more. Some people like 48 hours, but with how the market is right now, I probably wouldn't. Then here, your broker, this is my actual information, will have this part filled out already. It says that they are your agent as the buyer. This is where you, as Susie Homebuyer, would sign an address and everything here, and then you would send in the contract, and hoping that you get one of these, a seller acceptance. So that's pretty much all you need to figure out and fill out. If the seller does not accept, they can come down here, do offer rejected. They can have a counter offer, which is pretty typical. But that's pretty much the end of the contract, and that's all you really need to do. If you have any questions, you can email me at mike@phoenixrealestateaddict.com. Hope this was helpful.